All right. Well, hello everyone. My name is Bailey McCracken, and I've thought about my senior project topic since freshman year. I decided on something that has personally affected myself and my family for the past 13 years. This topic of vaccines has become very controversial in the last 3 years. Childhood illness due to vaccines. Based on the title, you can already tell that this is a very specific topic. To start off, I'm going to tell you a bit about vaccines and their origin. The word vaccine first appears in the late 18th century. It comes from the word vaccinus and from the word vacca, which means cow. That also comes from the early use of the cowpox virus against smallpox. The Oxford Language's definition of the word vaccine means a substance that is used to stimulate immunity to a particular infectious disease or pathogen, typically prepared from an inactivated or weakened form of the agent or its products. Now, those are a lot of terms that I don't quite understand, so a simple definition is a preparation that is used to stimulate the body's immune response against disease. Now that you know a little bit of the background about the word itself, let's talk about what is in the vaccine, how you make one, and the vaccine's timeline. A vaccine is made from very small amounts of dead or weakened germs that can cause diseases. So yes, essentially you are putting the virus in your body, but in an amount that is so minute that it shouldn't hurt your body, but help your body grow a strong immunity against that disease. A typical vaccine development takes 10 to 15 years, and sometimes even longer, to assess whether the vaccine is safe and effective in clinical trials, complete the regulatory approval processes, and manufacture enough vaccine doses for widespread distribution. Preclinical testing of vaccine candidates typically start in animal models, first in small mammals such as mice or rats, then non-human primates such as monkeys. Many vaccines can appear to be safe and induce protective immune responses in animals, but fail in human studies. Only vaccine candidates that are very promising in preclinical testing move forward into phase 1 clinical trials. Phase 1 clinical trials to assess safety, dosing, and immune responses can take 1 to 10 years, typically involving 1 to several dozen healthy volunteers. Only if a vaccine candidate is shown to be safe in phase 1 trials will it move to a larger phase 2 trial. Phase 2 clinical trials to assess safety and immune responses usually take 2 to 3 years to complete. These clinical trials continue to assess safety and immune responses, but in a larger number and a more diverse group of volunteers, typically 1 to several hundred people. Phase 2 may include target populations of a specific age or sex, or those with underlying medical conditions. Vaccines for children start with an adult volunteer and move to progressively younger groups of children. These trials do not assess how well a vaccine actually works. Only in phase 3 trials is a vaccine efficacy assessed. Phase 3 clinical trials to assess safety and efficacy usually takes 2 to 4 years. These clinical trials are critical to understanding whether the vaccines are safe and effective. They often include tens of thousands of volunteers. Participants are chosen at random to receive the vaccine or placebo. Assessing short-term and long-term safety is also a major goal of the phase 3 trials. After the vaccine passes the phase 3 trials, it is then sent to each country. This approval process takes 2 to 4 years. In the United States, the FDA is responsible for regulating vaccines. In situations when there is good scientific reason to believe that a vaccine is safe and is likely to prevent disease, the FDA may authorize its use through an EUA. Scaling up vaccine manufacturing is typically done near the end of the regulatory process because of the huge financial investment needed. In the United States, the FDA will inspect the manufacturing facilities. The cost of developing a new vaccine can be several billion US dollars prior to the scale up of manufacturing facilities. After a vaccine is approved and in widespread use, it is critically important to continue to monitor vaccine safety. Some rare side effects may only be detectable when a large group of people have been vaccinated. Safety concerns that are discovered at this late stage could lead to a licensed vaccine to be withdrawn from use. So now that I've bored you with how a vaccine is made, let's move on to the moral, ethical, and legal implications of a vaccine. According to the Oxford Languages, the definition of moral is a person's standards of behavior or beliefs concerning what is and what is not acceptable for them to do. Every parent should have the moral right to choose whether they want to give a vaccination to their child. This isn't something that should be forced upon them. Ethics is described as truthful, fair, and honest. How does that connect to vaccinations? Well, there are times people aren't given the true, fair, and honest facts about vaccines. So that leads to the question about the efficacy in vaccines. The National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, as amended, created the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, or VICP, a no-fault alternative to the traditional tort system. It provides compensation to people found injured by certain vaccines. The world itself would have been a completely different social and economic structure if vaccines weren't thought of. When entering the US or any country with an open border policy, this allows that country to experience spikes in diseases that have been eradicated. It also invites new diseases to that country. In the state of California, before admission, a child must obtain the first doses of each required vaccine and any other doses that are due because the period of the time has elapsed. These vaccines include polio, hepatitis B, MMR, and varicella, all before age 13. Over 1.2 million children didn't receive their MMR vaccinations in the beginning of the 2020 school year, and out of that year, there was only 13 cases of the measles. This being said, why are parents not given this kind of information when being told to vaccinate their children, especially when the likelihood of dying from these diseases is very unlikely and the side effects from the vaccine could be worse? Locally in the Yuba Sutter area, I know of 3 other children around my age who have become severely ill after a week of receiving their vaccinations. Genetically, we are all different, but the similarities in our diseases were mind-boggling. The common denominator was our parents not knowing the other adverse side effects to these vaccinations. The only side effects the parents were aware of were slight fever, irritability, and redness and pain at the injection site. I know these individuals because their parents read on social media what I was going through, and down the road they started to see similar side effects with their own children. This leads me to wonder how many other children in the Yuba Sutter area have been affected by vaccines who didn't know it due to parents not being given the proper information. So far, we have considered a good deal about vaccinations, but have said nothing in particular about how a Christian worldview informs this discussion. While the massive information I've already spoken about is not distinctly Christian, followers of Christ will undoubtedly be able to see the hand of God at work through the common grace of life-saving advancements. That is reason enough to be grateful for medicine and to praise God for extending compassion to a fallen world. Furthermore, as we who have the mind of Christ consider the vaccination debate, we should strive to honor him with how we use our minds. Given the widespread use of misinformation, Christians must be vigilant in identifying and rejecting flawed arguments, especially when they directly affect the health of vulnerable populations. 1 Corinthians 6:19 through 20 says, "Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, because you were purchased at a cost. So glorify God in your body." This doesn't give Christians a specific yes or no to the question, but the Bible tells us we must obey God rather than men. So what do we as Christians do? We take practical steps to make sure that the things we are putting in our body aren't poisoning us physically and spiritually. Look into the vaccination history. Who produces the vaccine? Why was it created? Where did it come from? What are the common and rare side effects? My mission for this is to encourage you to do your own individual research about vaccines and immunizations. After hearing all this information about vaccines, there is a reason why I feel so strongly about giving parents all the information about them. Here is a glimpse in my life over the last 13 years. Hello again, my name is Bailey McCracken, and I was diagnosed with systemic juvenile idiopathic rheumatoid arthritis. I was a very happy and healthy little girl, full of energy and the love of nature, cooking, singing, dancing, and exploring. My entire life changed when I was 5 years old. For me to go to kindergarten, my parents were told I needed vaccines. At the age of 5, I had already gone to a third world country and all over the US. I never needed any vaccines to do all the traveling I had done at my young age. I received my vaccines, and 1 week later, I became sick. My mom took me to my pediatrician several times. Still, my fevers would spike to 105 and then drop under 95. I had a rash on my inner thighs, back, and belly. I was so sick I lost 10 pounds. I would have accidents anywhere because I didn't have control over my body. Finally, my parents insisted that I be admitted to the hospital for further investigation. I was put on the 3rd floor at Sutter Roseville Children's Hospital in the oncology department. All the kids on the floor had no hair and would just look at all of mine. They had chest protection on to keep their bodies safe from falls, and many of them had wires connected to their heads picking up brain activity. This experience was scary. My mother and I hardly left the room, only to visit the activity center when I was well enough or to try and walk what little bit I could manage. Throughout my stay there, I was tested for dozens of illnesses. All of them were negative. Until one day, a tall Chinese man walked into my room and he had an interpreter introduce him. He was a specialist in oncology and he wanted to pull some of my bone marrow. My parents were both crying and I didn't know what was going on. I was prepped for my procedure, and then my mom insisted I be transferred to Stanford. Whatever my body was fighting was out of their area. At this point, my body was in renal failure. My kidneys were shutting down as well as my liver. My white blood cell count was 6 times what it should have been, stopping the flow of blood to my organs. My body was killing itself, and there was very little the doctors could do. After my bone marrow was pulled, I was put in an ambulance and transported to Stanford, and there I was met with 8 to 10 doctors, and I was on the blue team. I spent 1 week in Stanford there, and they started me on an experimental drug. If my body reacted positively to this drug, they would give me a diagnosis. If not, they would keep going. My mother was constantly doing research and was on the phone with doctors from all over the world, trying to figure out what was happening to me. At this point, my body was in full renal failure, and I was scheduled for my first blood transfusion. And at my age, they would only allow 7. I was put on a kidney transplant list as well as a liver. The chances of me getting either of those were very rare. My parents were in the process of having blood work done to offer me part of theirs. In this time, my mother received a call from a world-renowned doctor saying she could meet with us in 2 days. My mother sent this doctor an entire electronic file with everything because this doctor had a years-long waiting list to be seen. But by the hands of God, my mom was able to plead our case to the doctor's nurse. They got me right in, and I remember meeting her. She went down on both her knees with her arms out and embraced me. She then walked to my mom and said everything was going to be okay. From this point forward, my life changed. I started getting shots every day for 10 years. At the age of 7, I was able to give myself my own shots. This stopped my body from producing white blood cells. We were told that I would have stunted growth, not be able to go to a traditional school, shortened lifespan, not be able to play sports, and could not have children. I was determined to live the best and most fulfilling life I could, however long it may be. As a 6-year-old, I remember not wanting to go swimming because of all the bruises on my legs from my mom giving me my shots. I was embarrassed. Going to sleepovers was always hard for me because my mom would have to come first thing in the morning and give me my shot. This was hard for me to handle because I just wanted to be normal. Since that time, 13 years ago, I have come down with MAS, macrophage activation syndrome. 20% of the children do not make it out alive after having this side effect, and I've had it twice. Along with MAS, I've been hospitalized 4 times. I have monthly or bi-monthly blood work, specialist eye exams every 6 months, and doctor's appointments every 4 to 6 months. In the last year, my medication had to be changed because I had outgrown the dose of anakinra. My new doctors wanted me to administer 6 doses a day in order to have the right amount. This was not possible for me. So my parents told them they needed to find another answer. I am currently on another experimental drug that I get once a month. I am very thankful to have kimimab. This shot does the same as the last. However, this particular drug is what stage 4 cancer patients take to wipe out their immune system. so it's very powerful. The side effects of this drug are still being examined. Along with all of my doctor's appointments, I have really struggled with social, emotional problems due to the amount of medication I am on at any given time. One day I'm fine, the next time not. When my disease comes out of remission, I go on high doses of prednisone, which really messes with my brain, body, and emotions. I am typically put on this for long stretches of time, trying to tame my SJRA. I struggle with fatigue, weight loss, and gain, and have difficulty expressing myself sometimes. Every day is a struggle, and I never know how my body is going to be, and I never know what kind of mood I'm going to be in. Playing sports has been a dream for the last 4 years. As much of a struggle as it was, I've beaten the odds the doctors gave me. Summer of 2022 was the last time I was hospitalized with MAS. I still struggle with the side effects of all the medication to this day. My parents blame themselves for giving me this disease because they didn't do research before giving me the vaccines. They have been with me through every bump in the road, even going as far as trying to have my eggs frozen so one day I can have children of my own. Because of all the pain I've gone through, God has helped me through every battle. I am so thankful for being alive today. To conclude my senior project, I want to thank you all for listening to how vaccines have affected myself and my family. Some of you are parents and have made the choice to vaccinate your own children. This isn't a speech to be anti-vaccine. This is a speech that there needs to be a choice and more data shared with the parents before they make that choice. Who knows who I could have been and what more I could have accomplished if my parents had all the facts. Thank you, and these are my references.